and Gulf of California, that is highly toxic material. That map is extremely telling. There's not a meteorologist that can walk and chew gum that doesn't know that is absolutely engineered. You cannot create a temperature gradient like that with any natural hydrological cycle. That is engineered top to bottom.
So you're telling me this map right here, so explain to me what I'm looking at and how this proves that this is an engineered weather pattern that's happening right now, this huge snowstorm that's cutting across the United States and this cold snap. You're telling me that this map, so tell me what this map shows us.
If you went back 20 years, you would never, or 20 years or further, you would never find anything that even remotely resembled that map. Weather moves in the northern hemisphere from west to east because of the Coriolis effect of the planet, because of the spin.
Right.
So how can it be record warm in the west and record cold in the east? That's patently wrong. So they high pressure dome with frequency transmission facilities, which are weapons of mass destruction like HARP in Alaska. They can superheat the ionosphere, creates a massive expanding bulge in the atmosphere up and down. That creates a high pressure dome in the northern hemisphere, which spins the upper level wind currents clockwise. So picture that red spot of above normal or record high temperatures as being a high pressure dome that rotates clockwise, rotating all the moisture from the Pacific around it, or a low pressure zone below it, rotating below it. So they're spinning the moisture around the west, chemically nucleating it. And those are patented processes, by the way. These are endothermic reacting materials. Chinese government openly announced they're doing exactly this on a massive scale. All mainstream media covered it. If you bring it up here, they marginalize you. So they're seeding this cloud moisture with climate engineering aircraft, not the single engine propeller driven kind, but the kind that dump 100 tons in a single payload. And those endothermic reacting elements, in many cases, because this moisture is now so warm, it's reaching the surface, Jimmy, before it sets up. And that's why you're about to have massive ice storms, hugely load. And those endothermic reacting elements, in many cases, because this moisture is now so warm, it's reaching the surface, Jimmy, before it sets up. And that's why you're about to have massive ice storms, hugely destructive ice storms, because these materials aren't setting up until they reach the surface. And again, that's not natural either, to have an ice storm transition zone between the record warm migrating moisture and the eventual various forms of frozen chemically nucleated material that fall. That is an engineered scenario, period, top to bottom.
So what is in it for them to engineer something like this?
You're free shipping on Alibaba.com.
So what is in it for them to engineer something like this?
Again, you have the usual elements: aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, graphene. These are named in ice nucleation patents, chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. We have other elements named like urea, even in some of the patents. And these patents are posted at geoengineeringwatch.org. Again, this is not new technology. And Jimmy, you may remember that in various events like the Olympics, the Chinese government announced, don't worry about the rain, it won't. Remember the Sochi Olympics, where it was really in an area that was too warm for the Winter Olympics? Remember that?
Yeah.
So if you look from a distance in some of the shots there, because Russia's neck deep in these operations as well, so is China. So you had the mountain that the Olympics were held on, the Winter Olympics. It was covered with chemically frozen material. And if you look at the surrounding mountains, same elevation, there was nothing. We have a satellite image, Jimmy, of a spiral snow across flat Kansas, 10 miles wide and 300 miles long. Are we to believe that's nature? So people need to think of their first aid kit. Sits on their shelf, room temperature for 20 years. You mix the cold pack together. Those are endothermic reacting elements. You have ice instantly, chemical ice. So again, this is that on a scale that's inconceivable.
And again, so I'm having a hard time understanding what the governments get out of creating an incredible ice storm that's going to hit their own country. What do they get out of that? What would be the purpose? What's their aim and their goal?
First, let's start with any notion that any administration, whatever their political stripe, is here for the benefit of the American people. We need to throw that out the window right now.
Correct.
Second, we have the ability of the climate engineers and the controllers to confuse and divide the population as to the true state of damage already done to the planet, much of it from climate engineering, because it's been used as a weapon of weather for decades, a covert weather warfare weapon, crown jewel weapon of the military industrial complex. So when you create an event like this, it doesn't matter to most people if it's been record high for months and months. Once you create a cold down like this, that's the only thing they consider or remember. And they can't imagine then that there's any problem with the climate anywhere in the world, let alone any warming. So let's put this into a wider context. The most anomalously less warm region in the entire world since 2012 is the eastern half of the US lower 48. Why would that be? That's the most populated portion of the US by far. That's because the US has the biggest military by far, funding as much as the next 10 biggest militaries combined, and the US military has 3 times more atmospheric tankers than all other militaries in the world combined. So this is an engineered event, period. We can speculate about all the agendas and objectives. There are many, and they are not benevolent, but this is absolutely engineered. That map is as unnatural, meteorologically speaking, as it could possibly be.
And so how do the elites protect themselves from their own experiments?
I would ask this too, and that's a very fair question, because most people walk away from this issue because they say, quote, they wouldn't do this to themselves. And again, who are they? Those who print the money ultimately are at the top of this pyramid from every direction. They control media, they control elected officials, they control militaries. But how did they protect themselves from the detonation of 2,400 nuclear bombs? How will they protect themselves from Fukushima, for example, triple nuclear meltdown? No technology to fix it, no end in sight. We have 442 new plants that will go into meltdown as collapse ensues. We're building 60 more. We're not dealing with sanity. And this is most important, Jimmy. They look at this as a risk to risk scenario. That is their words, not mine. The risk of doing it versus the risk of not doing it, and not for benevolent purposes. Their objective is to retain their power till the brutal, bitter end, even if they only have ashes to rule over. So again, we have enough examples of human behavior, especially with those in power, that they ultimately don't care about the consequences of their actions, even to themselves, if that's what it takes to retain their power.
So I want to show you this one thing. I showed you it briefly, but I'll read this is from Erin Elizabeth Health Nut News. She says, this was the sky today here in Florida in the back of our little farm. And she asked, Grok, please tell everybody how an Israeli company called Stardust Solutions is going to come here and start spraying April 1st. I wish it were an April Fool's joke. Give a full list of the billionaire donors, American and otherwise. And so Grok responds. Grok says Stardust Solutions, an U.S.-Israeli geoengineering startup, plans to begin outdoor tests of sunlight-reflecting particles in April 2026 to cool the planet. No sources confirm Florida specifically or an exact April 1st start date. Tests involve aircraft releases, but locations are undisclosed. Knowing investors include Lower Carbon Capital, that's Chris Sacca, Exor, that's the Agnelli family, Future Ventures, Steve Jurvenston, Future Positive Kindred Capital, Attestor, and AWZ Ventures, total funding $75 million from just 13 backers. So, again, this seems crazy that there isn't a law preventing this. So what is the legality of this kind of stuff?
Let me back into this. I know Erin Elizabeth. I know Nicola, Erin's partner. And
how do you see yourself live your best life? Maybe for you,
on this issue, I hope they continue to do research, because the whole Stardust Solutions, Make Sunsets, all these startups are smoke and mirrors designed to distract from the elephant in the sky that has budgets not in the tens of millions, but in the trillions for the aircraft that are deployed all over the globe. So again, all of these types of smoke screens are designed to distract the population, to confuse them as to what's really going on, what scale it's on. These programs were first fully deployed over 80 years ago, Jimmy, immediately after World War II. They've been ramped up steadily ever since. In fact, 1998 was a major ramp up. Jimmy, you remember when they incorporated the term climate change instead of global warming?
Yes.
And they did that in 1998 because That was the warmest year ever recorded to that point in time. They decided to double down on climate engineering. They knew they would be creating events exactly like what's happening right now in the US, Winter Storm Fern, that they will blame ultimately as a result of global warming, when in fact it's 100% engineered with chemical ice nucleation operations. But because they use the climate change term, people accept that as, oh, that's just a part of this process. No, it's not. It's engineered. And we're perplexed at geoengineeringwatch.org as to why all of the sources that claim to be fighting climate engineering are pretending that events like what's happening right now is some sort of sign of global cooling or coming ice age. That's exactly the narrative the climate engineers and the controllers want. Confuse and divide the population, an event that's totally engineered. And we have online people, again, towing the narrative for the controllers. This is winter weather warfare, period.
And so, as Kurt points out many times on the show, there was, in the 70s, there was a global treaty that where you wouldn't use weather modification weapons, right? Am I correct on that's when that happened?
Yes, it's called the NMOD Treaty. Yes, 1976.
And so when they had this, so as Kurt also points out, well, you don't create a nuclear treaty unless you already have nuclear bombs. You don't create a weather modification treaty unless you already have the tools to create weather modification in a way that it could be used as a weapon of war. So that was way back in this, that's 50 years ago. Back in the 70s, they already had this technology, so much so that they had to have a treaty about it.
You're exactly right. And that treaty came from the success of Project Popeye in Vietnam in the 60s. The U.S. military so successful at controlling the flow of precipitation over that country that the international community demanded these treaties. But if we go back even further, 1947, Project Cirrus, U.S. military's first announced deployment of hurricane modification operations. And we knew they were beta testing during World War II because we have film footage of the B-17s that people assume is all condensation all over the sky. We found military archival film, B-17s flying in formation, leaving massive plumes, and then instantly shutting off. Did that plane fall out of formation? Did its engines all die? No, that was a beta test because we know they were deployed immediately after World War II. So when people ask, why would they want to do this? The obvious response is, why wouldn't they? Of course they do. With this weapon, they can bring populations to their knees, including the U.S. population, whenever they want, and blame nature. This is the crown jewel weapon of the military-industrial complex.
And so when we look at this map, and what you are saying, what's happening right now in the United States, this warm snap on the West Coast and this brutal winter storm happening in the Midwest and the East, you're saying that they're doing this and then they blame it because on climate change, because they always say, yeah, you're going to have worse storms, you're going to have worse flooding, you're going to have worse snow, and they blame it all on climate change. And you're saying that it's engineered.
This is where the equation becomes more complicated, and you're correct. You are exactly correct. There's nothing natural about this, and the map you see, the scenario you see, is a result of massive climate intervention operations. But what people need to also consider, we have been very poor stewards of the planet. I'm not denying that. We've trashed this planet in the geologic blink of an eye. We have problems. But we can't call anything natural weather at this point. Once you taint the system, you taint the entire system. And this is not one country doing it over their airspace. We have countries all over the world actively or passively participating. The atmosphere is literally a battle zone at this point, Jimmy. And we have, going back to 78, 2 years after the NMOD treaties we just talked about, we have 800-page congressional documents posted at geoengineeringwatch.org, important sections highlighted, outlining even then budgets into the hundreds of millions of dollars with participation between otherwise adversarial countries because of the cross-border ramifications. This collusion and cooperation has been going on for decades.
Okay, well, Dave Wigington, I appreciate you coming on and giving us your expertise. Is there anything did I leave out you want to add?
Just that people shouldn't underestimate their ability